Hey there, I'm John Chen. I'm the CEO of GeoTeaming. I'm the author of this little book called Engaging Virtual Meetings, and I'm excited. I've got this guest with me. We get a chance to trade. We used to meet up face to face all the time. That was a while ago, but we've done all sorts of other things here too. But wait till you just hear some spec sheet on this guy. He hails from Seattle, Washington. He's an Emmy Award winner. He's designed the interactive lobby installation at Salesforce's Bellevue, Washington skyscraper. But more importantly, he's going to talk about some cool new stuff he's doing online. He's the partner and the chief creative officer of Mode Studios. Let's say hello to one, the only, Bob Bonniol. Bob, how are you doing today?
My goodness, what a fantastic introduction. I don't know how to live up to that. I'm doing well, John. I'm doing good. I'm healthy. I'm here with you, jamming on stuff that really gets me excited. Um, and yeah. I would categorize myself as ready, curious, healthy, and working.
And working. Yeah, you know what? And being healthy in this pandemic means that hopefully we're taking the proper precautions. You too were in the physical world, though. I think a lot of your work was in the physical world. And so, well, why don't we start with this very easy question? Some of my friends don't know you. So tell a little bit about who you are and some of the things that you do. And you can do pre, post pandemic, whatever you like.
Sure. Well, I mean the commonality is that whether it's pre or post pandemic, my obsession and my craft has been in finding ways to bring people together to experience entertainment, to experience presentation, to experience music, to experience joy, to experience communication. And once I have them together, I seek to shift their consciousness, which is, I think, what any creative director or production designer or producer or person that is involved in a thing like that might say. So that's the common thread. Now, before the pandemic, what that looked like is people getting together in arenas or theaters or conference centers. Uh, I had been blessed, and Mode Studios had been fortunate in that our practice sort of spanned a lot of market verticals, which is a little bit different than a lot of people who do what I do. But we have had a really great practice in designing concerts, designing broadcasts for shows, in particular the contest shows, things like America's Got Talent and
Oh.
American Idol, X Factor, The Voice.
Wait, you got to work
Um,
on all those shows?
what's that?
You got to work on all those shows.
Yes, yeah, I got to work on those shows, got to create concert tours, got to design operas for Seattle Opera and other opera companies, got to design brand activations for companies like Chevy and Microsoft and Salesforce and
Yeah.
um, and have, as you mentioned our installation in the Salesforce building. We've also have this incredible practice of creating interactive engagements in public spaces. So, that really kind of got a good start when we designed the translucent interactive screens that were in Microsoft Studios A through D when they opened.
Yeah.
And that was sort of a beginning for us with that, and now that sort of had extended as well. So, pre-pandemic, that was a lot of people coming together in a space, a physical space,
Hmm.
to communicate or to be entertained or to be educated. Now, what
Yeah.
it looks like is a virtual space, and we're still doing the same things. We're creating musical performances that happen in virtual spaces. We're producing lots of virtual events, which of course are happening in shared virtual spaces, and which in many ways mirror the same goals and techniques that we would use in an in-person event. Um, it's kind of hard to do architecture virtually, so we're not doing as much of that anymore. But I think that uh, that's going to be an interesting sector to see how it moves forward in terms of commercial architecture, and the needs for people to gather together to do business, I think, are seeing maybe a permanent redefinition.
When you
Uh,
say architecture too, I mean, do you talking about physical structure? Or you're also talking about meeting architecture, or I mean, they can be used in a couple different ways.
well, that's a really nuanced question, right? And I think I was primarily referring to physical structure, but we also spend a lot of time thinking deeply about the architecture of an event, more of the metaphorical, the messaging architecture, the the
Right.
production architecture, certainly. And you actually find me in my living room today because my office has been absconded with by the broadcast team, who are today rehearsing a virtual production that we're creating for an organization called ICIC, which is an inner city entrepreneurial advocacy organization.
Oh,
So
very.
we've got a conference coming up for them December 3rd, 5th, and 8th. And so today, my office is completely packed with the broadcast team, safely distanced, of course. But they're in there working with our tech stack and with the client to rehearse that event, which is as critical with virtual events, if not more so, than it is with real events.
Yeah, it's something that I vehemently tell people about. Like one of my favorite stories is that in a rehearsal we suddenly discovered somebody who was currently in the role of producer who had never produced a show before, and that didn't reveal itself until the rehearsal. And we're like, oh, we need to, and that one change actually I think is one of a collection of changes that really helped this program become successful. So Bob, I'm really curious, what skills for you do you feel have really transferred over, right? Because I know you have a whole collection of these design skills. What are some of these practices that you brought over going, oh yeah, we need this and we need this and we need this to be successful here?
Well, and I think the beautiful thing is to link it to what you were just talking about, which is you ran across a producer who had never actually produced before, right? And who now is producing a virtual event. I think that one of the skills or one of our work products that immediately transferred over is education, right? We, as a company, Mode Studios, even when we were producing live events, we were really always skirting along an innovative edge. We were always looking for new technologies. We were looking for new ways to tell stories, whether it was, implementing big sort of media architectures for events, or doing things like using drones, choreographed drones in events, or we're always looking for new ways to tell stories. With that comes an obligation to educate your client, right? How are we going to do this? What does it mean for the event? What are the benefits? What are the risks, right? So, for us, educating our clients is something that is absolutely carried over. Colleen, who is my partner and who is the founder of the company, she likes to say that probably some of our most important product that we give people isn't production. It's what she calls it comfort and courage, right? Uh, and she says that quite on purpose because we're always trying new things. We're always innovating. We're helping clients to express themselves in new ways. For us as production professionals, that's already challenging enough. But for a client whose real vocation might have nothing to do with production and have lots to do with other things, they don't even know the old way or the tried and true way, never mind the new way, right? So we give them comfort by giving them knowledge, right? By saying, this is what we're going to do. This is why we're going to do it. This is why it's going to connect to your audience. This is how we're going to measure the success of that, right? And that knowledge gives them comfort, right? And that's an ongoing process in the show. Courage comes from witnessing our competency and our transparency and our curiosity and our ability. So we educate the client and then we hold their hands and we say, we're with you. We're your partners in this.
Yeah.
Don't be afraid. We're going to find a way. So comfort and courage and education are the big transfers. Then there's a lot of sort of, usual suspect stuff. We've always been a very media-driven production company. When we were getting together in rooms, we were very prone to creating big screenscapes, doing projection mapped events. It would be fair to say our designs have always been driven by media. So media has carried over, and the use of media, the use of content. And with that, the understanding of the balance between the technological and the human, right? because you can't just put people in a room with a bunch of screens and just show them content and not engage them and not invite their interaction and not set up a virtuous circuit of energy between the audience and presentation. We had to do it in the real world. We have to even more do it now in the virtual world because we lack the physical connection. So that's carried over, and everything to do with that, the technological stuff, you know, that we have deep chops with things like animation, with gaming engines, with broadcast technologies.
Yeah.
Also the theatrical tradition that we come from. Colleen and I both started in the theater. The company has a practice that still extends to the theater. We don't do as much of it as we used to, but we're still, you know, for instance, we're involved with that project I was talking about earlier, Avalona, which is a sort of a theatrical musical project. But the knowledge and what in theater is referred to as dramaturgy, what in theater is referred to as the performer audience dynamic, right? This very much carries over to virtual manifestations of these things, because I think it's easy for people, for instance, if we just talk about a vanilla communication meeting, like we're going to have a little conference with the sales staff of a company, that can all too easily just become a sort of, as you well know, I mean, you have literally written the book on this now, right? But that can just become a flavorless, odorless, cold meeting that's happening in a browser window, right?
Yep.
But when you bring theatrical tropes to it, when you stimulate the imagination, when you seek to create a reaction, when you invite interaction and call and response, you know, when we find, for instance, and I know that we're going to delve into this probably while we're talking here, but you know, a lot of the games that we play in the theater to loosen up the performers or the audience, you know, a great thing that's carried over for us. For years and years, we have worked with Blue Man Group as production designers, and we've designed many, many of their shows. And in fact, Carl Glob, who used to be an artistic director at Blue Man Group from the beginning of that company, when Blue Man Group was acquired by Cirque du Soleil, Carl joined Mode Studios. He came over to Mode. So we, you know, we carry that too. I don't know if you've ever been to a Blue Man show, but so much Blue Man is nonverbal. They don't talk.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And so much of it is also inherently interactive. It's about bringing the audience on stage to interact with them. It's about the audience like doing things out in the audience to become part of the whole show, right? So we try to also bring those kind of theatrical play tropes to what we're doing virtually.
Yeah, let me tell my favorite Blue Man story. This is really in honor of my college roommate who actually passed away a couple years ago. But he's the first to introduce me. We were always into these weird, alternative, unique shows, and Blue Man was one he showed me. And I think one of the coolest experiences, they take something very simple like paper towels, right, or like ribbon paper, and they had the whole wall back ribbon, and they start pulling it over, and there's something magical that happens. It really, you can see this thing going. You take an ordinary object and you make it extraordinary, and that was something that made me a Blue Man fan in the beginning. Which leads me to this question too. I think you're really a good person to ask this question, right? Which is, sometimes now I'm working with people and they're having to make this choice. Do I go for high production value, or do I go for the experience, or some intersection in between? So I'm curious to hear what's more important to you, like high production value or an engaging experience?
Well, what is high production value, right? The value delivered on production as a result of production, or the value of the set dressing, right? So, and I'm here to say that high production value is a production that delivers a valuable experience, right? So I don't need to crack the code to deliver a hologram of toilet paper being pulled over the audience. I could just use toilet paper, right? So it's like, the value in that is the the experience like of you know, and I love that moment in the show, you know, where we pull the paper down and you pull it all out and the paper travels down the audience and then ends up gathered down by the stage. It's such a simple goofy thing, right? It involves everybody and it so works.
Yep.
You know, so I'm going to say this. I mean, while we are prone to doing technologically advanced things at Mode, I know what you mean when you're talking about production values, right? You're talking about, you know, high-end content, incredibly thoughtful and potentially expensive design elements, right? I would say that in the virtual event space right now, XR is super hot, right? Where you know, companies that are communicating, for instance, Microsoft has now built a factory for this out on their campus where they build stages that are LED walls and floor, and they track the cameras, and then they use gaming engines to create these immersive virtual spaces for their virtual presenters, right? That's what I think you mean by high production value. We do that, but I want to say that the power of the message is everything, right? And that becomes an empty vessel if I'm not engaging you from it, if I'm not creating a response in you from it, right? And that can just as easily be done in ways like, for instance, we did an event this summer where we sent out to the participants a whole kit. And it was a digital kit, right? You didn't get it in the mail. It came in an email and it had a bunch of printable stuff and things that you could make. And one of them was, remember when we were kids in high school and you had the little fortune teller thing that you folded up and you would lift the thing and you'd find, you know, will Susie go on a date with me? You know, and you'd well, we sent out a bunch of those things and we had a moment with the audience where we had the people, you know, do their fortunes in regards to their, you know, their new business endeavors, right? That was beautiful. It didn't cost anything, right? That there was no cost. We put some really good thought into the whimsy and the fun that we made that object with,
Yeah.
you know, but in the end, it probably just cost us you know, an hour's worth of paying somebody or a few hours worth of paying somebody, a graphic designer, to think about that. And then it cost nothing to actually happen in the event. And everybody lost their mind. They loved it. They loved it because it was, you know, it was like we didn't tell people when we were going to do it. And when we whipped it out, it was like everyone's like, oh, this reminds me of being a kid. And, you know, this whole thing. And it was a really powerful moment in the thing. And it was like, you know, it was the paper fortune telling device. You know, you know, that as opposed to an empty presentation on an XR stage, you know, I think that was enormously more valuable, and it was even maybe more valuable than some good presentations I've seen on an XR stage, because production values don't always invite production interaction.
That's what I'm looking for. I think, Bob, because you've been in the business so long too, you know that you can create that kind of scene using millions-dollar technology, and you also know you can create those kind of experiences with like 10 cents or 2 cents worth of technology. And I think in the end, then you get back to that, which is what's the experience the whole group and the audience is having is really gets back to it. So I'm going to get into this question, and then you've seen a lot of virtual meetings now since March, and maybe before that, right? You've done a lot of other unique work. What has to happen for a virtual meeting to be engaging for you?
There has to be a lot of thought about cadence and tempo. Timing, right, is maybe one of the biggest first containers that you can define that can make success. Nobody has the mental acuity or sort of resilience to sit and look at a screen, you know, for 8 hours during the day, uninterrupted, right? So the best virtual events have been short or have been appropriately portioned into bite-sized pieces. I think that that's been a key thing for me. The best virtual events that I've attended have been the ones that have invited these sort of moments that I described with the paper thing, where, you know, where now we're going to give some power and some agency to the audience or to the participants to do something and feed back to the presenter. and then, back and forth and back and forth, and the volleys of that. The best events have been those that have thought about that programmatically. And I've seen a lot of people thinking about that technologically, like they're going to gamify their event. You're going to get badges depending on how many sessions you attend, or things like that. And I think that's not, that is also potentially useful, but the best manifestations of virtual events have been ones that have asked me to think and then to respond and give something back that then becomes a crucible for further development, right? And I would say that goes all the way back to, and also I think that maybe one of the best things that, the virtual events that are really great are the ones that take into account that, look, the content for an event is important, right? It's fundamental, but what makes going to a conference or going to a concert or going to an event special is the chance encounters, the moment when I can turn to the person next to me and say, can you believe that? The meeting someone in the Starbucks line, the moment that I get to go skulk outside the stage door and wait for the presenter to come out to ask a question or to have an interaction. And the best events that I've been either part of or that I've been attending have been the events that have found the way to create the spaces for those things to occur. Yeah.
That is a key aspect. Create the spaces, which also tells people you got to do two things. I think you need to you need to create gaps. Right? You don't have to, like, people are deathly afraid of silence on virtual. And I tell people, you need to learn how to get comfortable with that silence. All the good stuff is around there. And so, for instance, one of our principles is when we ask the audience to contribute and nobody says anything, I'll just wait. I'll wait. Because two things are going to happen. One is all the introverts actually get to think now. And they're like, oh my gosh, thank you, John, right? And some extrovert is going to blow a gasket at some point going, I can't take the silence, and we're just going to start talking, right? And I think that if you get, that's the one place where I think silence on virtual is really, really productive. And I love this. Create the spaces for this serendipity to occur. That actually happened on our happy hour. It turns out two people that we kind of knew each other around the event here and stuff, they'd been meeting on happy hour since March. And only last month did they discover they lived one block from each other. And the way they discovered it, Bob, was that an airplane was flying over one of them and somebody else heard the audio in their thing going, are you hearing that airplane? Wait a minute. That means you got to be close to my house. So that auditory cue was the way they figured out the serendipity.
Yeah, this exactly the serendipity, and the silence invites serendipity. I've been fortunate to work with Seth Godin for a number of years, and I've coached his alt MBA program, and I've been involved in helping to build his communities around Akimbo. Seth calls that silence holding tension, right? And magical things come in those moments when we're able to hold tension. And you mentioned a few, like you give the introvert space, right? You create a circumstance where maybe you're going to invite an outburst. You're going to invite, a moment where the person who just can't take that quiet is going to maybe come out and spark something that was never going to happen otherwise. In a kind of a virtual meeting that's focused on answering a question or solving a problem, that kind of holding of tension invites a different level of discussion. It allows people to think beyond the tactical neurological process of a conversation, and now get into something that's more like an exchange of ideas. I am a huge believer in silence. It's why Wagner, the composer of operas, he begins each one of his operas with an extended, uncomfortably extended period of silence and darkness. If you've ever been to an opera house where they're doing the Ring cycle or they're doing Parsifal or they're doing any of Wagner's work, the house lights go out and the orchestra does not start. It's just silence until you can literally feel the audience becoming agitated. And this is a calculation on Wagner's part. It is it is in that moment of agitation that the audience lets go of preconceptions and expectations and now becomes accessible to hear something or absorb something new, right?
Yeah.
This is a powerful thing to use in the virtual event space too. Absolutely.
You just be willing to do the things that other people aren't willing to do. That's one of the key trends. So, Bob, I also get this piece here too, which is I think you're a big history and fact buff. And you were recently, just before we started talking, we're talking about how the plague, not this plague, the past plague led into, I think, the Renaissance. So I would love to hear your how to reframe maybe for some other people, because a lot of people of course are going pandemic boo, pandemic right is terrible, blah blah blah, but I think you see it as a catalyst, and it has been a catalyst. I mean, the research is already here. Twilio already put out 7 years advancement in IT because of pandemic. It had made this is some game changing stuff happening. So what are some of your comparisons that you have, and what do you see?
Well, you're alluding to, we were talking before we started, before we went live, and I mentioned that, the plague was the moment of pivot from the Middle Ages to the Renaissance. And there's any number of reasons why that was the case, but one of the principal reasons was that the common man suddenly became able to transmit knowledge. The need for people to try to tell each other how to stay safe, or to fight the plague, or to recover from the plague, or what to do because of this disaster. It ripped the segregation of information from the church and state, and spread it among the common man. There was a loss of power from the institutions because of this incredible force majeure. And as a result, population adapted, people adapted, and they began to move at that 7-year IT jump that we're experiencing because of our own little plague episode. I would posit that information technology took a centuries sized jump during, going from the Middle Ages to the Renaissance. And that's because great disruption almost always is the gateway to incredible new innovation, to discovery. Humans like the same old thing. They like the usual thing. They will not stretch themselves into discomfort unless they're put in a situation where they have to. And now we have all together, all of us, been put into an uncomfortable situation where we have to stretch. And it is all, those are very special circumstances. And I don't, I don't wish a plague on anyone. I think that a disruption like this can be beyond uncomfortable. It can even, we know that it can be life-threatening. It can be, there are many, many reasons why the present situation and other periods of disruption are very bad. Yeah. But the great thing is the good that comes out of it, right? Like, we would never be having this discussion we're having right now about advancing the ways that humans can collaborate together and work together and be entertained together and communicate together. We wouldn't be having it if we didn't have COVID. So, so I very much look on it as a blessing, and I there is historical precedence for it, times of war, times of incredible social disruption, times of pandemics. These tend to be, if we look across the historical cycle, times when culture then leaps forward, right? So I'm really excited about that, and I choose to stay focused on the good. I'm not in denial about the bad at all, and it's touched me personally.
Oh, how so? Can I ask?
Well, we've one of our partners got COVID and had a very, very hard time with his recovery. I've had family members who have passed from COVID. So
Very close.
I've been that there's no denying that these are incredibly personal, painful results of this. Mm-hmm. At the same time, I'm the kind of person who's like, I have to live in the moment I'm in. If I start future tripping, that's no good for me. and there's nothing I can do to change things that have already happened. So I kind of find that an academic exercise. I like to live in the moment, and I like to anchor myself in saying, what could I improve in this moment? How could I be of service in this moment? You
I like
know, so in that spirit, I am finding the present circumstances to be very interesting.
on the personal development side, asking different questions as opposed to why does this suck so bad, right? How many bad things happened this year? Instead of asking, it's just like you can really like shift some things happening by asking different questions. So I appreciate you sharing that. We're talking about, I'm going to head already to the cool stuff. So you said you're excited, and you're really excited because you're working on some cool new stuff. I would love to hear that. I wrote a whole chapter. The last chapter was like, what do we see for the future of virtual meetings? I'm curious to see what you're already seeing now and what you think you're going to see in the future.
Well, I think that, I think that there's big paradigm shifts coming on. I mean, one of the things that I think we touched on a little bit before we went live is that, for instance, we're working on a big musical performance that prior to COVID would have shown up uh, it would have manifested as a big arena tour, right? This is a project we're working on called Avalona. It's based on the personal experiences of Dina Fanai, who is the principal composer of the work, and Bob Kinkle. They worked previously with Trans-Siberian Orchestra and were some of the people that created that phenomena. And Avalona is a different sort of epic scale musical production that's based a little bit on Dina's life experience, but also on the book The Mists of Avalon, which are a telling of the Arthurian legend, but from the perspective of the women. And if you've never encountered Mists of Avalon or read that book, I highly recommend it. It's a great book if you're at all, if you have a love for fantasy at all. It's just a phenomenal book, great characters. But that work, when we were at this time last year beginning to work on it, and through the winter, we were on a trajectory to create a big arena musical spectacle.
Yeah.
We were 2 weeks away from our first New York workshop where we were going to kind of create an environmental expression of it and have an audience and expose them to the music, when the plug got pulled. And right away, because of the aforementioned comfort and courage, right away, we went to Bob and Dina and said, hey, there's an opportunity here. What if, right? We asked the question, what if? And in this case, what if took the shape of, what if we used Unreal Engine, a gaming engine created by Epic Games here in Seattle, Bellevue. What if we used Unreal Engine to take this concert spectacle and make it a massive multiplayer online music experience, right? So we could create a world for this to happen. We could use technologies like motion capture or even real-time performative technologies so that people could experience the world of the show, the music of the show, the performance of the show. They could have agency in the show, that the decisions they make and the ways that they interacted with each other and with this world could lead to different ways for the show to manifest. So that's incredibly exciting. And now we're really starting to get down to the nitty gritty of designing these things and doing this. And, hopefully we're going to be able to show the world this show, by sometime in early spring. We're hoping to actually be able to expose people to this experience. And I think that this is not just a reaction. It's not just a sort of consolation prize. I think eventually that show will manifest as a live experience, potentially in arenas. But at that point, it will then use everything we learned and developed to create the immersive online experience. And that will translate itself to that other different experience. I've always been a big believer in the 360 approach to creative stuff, that if you've got something, if you've got an intellectual property, you've got a great idea, you've got a song, you've got a piece of entertainment, I love the idea of let's explore that in a graphic novel format. Let's explore that as a piece of cinema. Let's explore that as a piece of theater. Let's explore that as a piece of participatory interactive experience, right? And tell that story in all of those ways and learn what an audience can gain from each of those things. And so many of the projects that Mode has worked on over the years have been like that. They've manifested as maybe as print media, as cinema, as broadcast, as live experience. So I love that. I'm a huge believer in that.
Mhm.
So we're super excited about Avalona and the work that we're developing doing that. And I think that, Epic realizes that they're, the Unreal Engine platform, by the way, is so much more than a game engine now. Architects are using it to do big site planning, pre-visualization. Broadcasters are using it to create real-time reactive experiences in broadcast. Businesses are using it to create experiences where you get to be immersed in information, right? So Epic has realized that they have a tool on their hands now that is a conduit to communication for the future, for immersive digital experiences, not just massive multiplayer online games. Because what is that really? What is a massive multiplayer online game? It's a form of theater. It's a form of consensual experience where we have agency, where we learn things, where we shift our consciousness.
Games, I knew that was happening when games started to getting production buzzes as similar or greater than movies, because
Absolutely.
immersive movie. And now there's this aspect of like, what if it's this immersive concert? And then a concert doesn't have to be an hour. A concert can actually be an experience. Like you can actually stay in it and you get into this World of Warcrafty type of, like, it's a lifestyle type of thing. I had this one idea that was close to this, was like, Don't Crash the Planet. It's kind of based around like Google Earth, and that you could zoom into a location. It would give you real-time data about what was happening at location. Multiple teams of players could come in and actually solve stuff, and that you could actually give money to the teams that actually got real ideas that solved a real challenge with that. Yeah, so I love that. What I'd love to hear too is, you're working with a lot of clients right now. What are some of the best things or number one things that you need to tell, that you've been telling your clients? Like you see that trends, things that you're giving your best advice or best coaching, best expertise in.
Well, it's funny. One of the things that we've been telling to clients is to not try to recreate, and it's funny because I just described Avalona and it happening in this game world and that, but by the same token, we've been really preaching to clients about the idea of use the strength of the medium, right? So we've had some clients that have come to us and said, look, we want to recreate our trade show, but as a sort of game experience. And my question to them has always been, why? Why do you want to walk an avatar around virtual trade show booths? Why do you build a trade show booth the way you build it? You build it that way because you're confined to an area of carpet in a convention center. You've got certain rigging capacities. You've got certain economic capacities. Why would you want to rebuild that in the digital world? Why wouldn't you use the strengths and the capacities and the opportunities of a digital virtual world to do something that is inherently powerful? It's the whole Marshall McLuhan thing where the medium is the message, right? Why not lean into the strength of the medium? So we tend to tell our clients, don't try to recreate what you were doing in real life in the virtual. Instead, let's begin at the virtual spot and think about the ways we can use the powerful tools of this medium to recreate the result, right? So the result of a trade show is that you maybe encounter a new product, that you maybe get to experience some of it, that you maybe get to play with it a little bit. Okay, how might we do that in a virtual space? And there are many, many, many ways to do that other than to make, world of consumer electronic craft. So
Yeah. I think what the message that I've had too is that that virtual meetings, right, can be engaging, and sometimes they can be better. They can be better than the face to face if you look for the aspects right? Like for instance, something simple. Simultaneous editing has been around for over a decade, but most people still weren't really using it. But now that everybody is guaranteed to have a computer and the right internet and a connection and everything else, then it's actually way easier than it is now than it was then in the boardroom, because you weren't sure if everyone had the right device, the right connection, the right hookup, and everything else like that. So yeah, so sometimes it can be better, and I love that. One of our other speakers in my last conference was like that, just saying take the opportunity to flip the whole thing, look at it then as an entirely new problem as opposed to just porting a solution and porting, like for instance, porting a conference directly over to the face-to-face format to the virtual format has proved disastrous for more than one conference. And so, yeah, I love that. I hadn't thought about the medium as the message here in virtual, but I've probably been subconsciously doing it. So I appreciate that you brought that out.
Well, yeah, and look, I'm not saying that people aren't successful doing that, like recreating the virtual. Like we look at this incredible $2 billion funding round that Hopin just got, right? And this is just my own personal thing. I got no problem with Hopin or whatever, but you know what I don't like? I don't like going and sitting around a virtual table, right? Graphically. I do like getting together with small groups where I can introduce myself to new people and have those interactions. But I don't find the idea that like I need to do a little virtual conference table round and seat myself. And why am I bothering with these mechanics yet? That idea and some of those functionalities are so compelling that Hopin just got a $2 billion, I think that like an A round investment, right? So I think that there's a lot of room in this space right now. There's a lot of room in the virtual and digital event space to think deeply and to innovate and to create new ways to do things. Hopin isn't going to be the last company that gets a big investment or that gets acquired or that Pathable, which is another company right here in Seattle. They just got a big investment, and they sort of have a similar sort of virtual, they have another kind of virtual platform.
Yeah.
This is a space that's not going away. Like
No.
even when we get past the pandemic, the big companies have seen the savings and the value and the ability to more closely measure return on investment on a virtual conference versus a real one. Like it's night and day. You can actually get KPIs on the success of a virtual event that you could never get with the real one, right? Just because of the medium, right? So even when we get back to having, real life events, I think you're going to see always the hybrid sidecar. Any real event you go to is probably going to have its virtual companion happening just because of the reach and because of these advantages it gives. So this is a business, this is a modality that is not temporary. This is not going away, and it is going to continue to evolve. And I think that it's such a powerful thing that it's just going to grow and grow and grow from here. And we are here, all of us, you and me, and I know that the people that follow you and that are involved with your community,
Yeah.
it's about exploring this and blowing this up and moving it to the next level and taking it to the next stage. And I am telling you, we should be joyful because we have years of this ahead of it, and we are right at the beginning. So
Well, you'll love this. We're almost time to close, but think deeply. I love that, Bob. And me and another compatriot, Elizabeth Glau, we're actually kind of working on a meetings manifesto, a new meetings manifesto. And some of the items that are in there are like things like the new normal is old, which is like, people, we've been doing this for a long time. It's just the rest of you are finally here with us. The pioneers, like 5-10%ers, are here. The second one, like another one that was on there was, we want virtual meetings that make you cry in a good way. Maybe
yeah.
in a bad way, but mostly in a good way, right? So those are some of the things that are boiling in the meetings manifesto. So I'd love to see, can you leave us with some potential contribution to our meetings manifesto of like how you see the future?
Kind of, let's see, if I were going to think about like my core message, it would be kind of reflect back on some of the stuff we've already discussed, which is, you know, uh, uh, make room for the human, right? Make room for the human to be the human. Make room for the connection. Make room for the happy accident. Make the spaces for these things to occur. And that's both a mental space, a conceptual creative space, and a digital technological space.
Mm.
Give people space to be people. Your event will succeed.
I translate that into make the space for serendipity.
Yes.
I like that. I like that. So I'm going to suggest that inside of that. Bob, thank you so much for your time. I know you're extraordinarily busy, but it's so great to have another Seattleite in the house. Where will people find you?
People can find me online at Facebook at Bob Bonniol. Bob Bonniol is my usual social. You can also find me at Instagram at Bob Bonniol and in all the usual spaces and places. And if you're looking specifically for the work we're doing with Mode, you can find us at modestudios.com.
Outstanding. Well, thank you so, Bob. Any final words for our guests out there before we say goodbye to our Facebook Live audience?
Um, take care of yourselves, make the space for you to be a human too. So it's all too easy these days to get too involved with work or too wrapped up in politics or feel, oppressed by things that are beyond your control. Live in the moment you're in, bring value to other people, find a good way to be of service, and remember that with bad comes good. And with fear comes faith. So, and the two can occupy the same space at the same time. So, have faith. Things are going to get better, and we are at the beginning of an incredible adventure.
Thank you, Bob. As the guy, I just took 3.5 days off last weekend for the first time in quite a few months. I can tell you how right on you are. Thank you, Bob, again, and we'll see you next time.
Yes, you will. Thanks, John.